title. At a charity event hosted by my wife, her lover's wife walked in, wearing my wedding ring. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. David Miller had always thought of his marriage as the epitome of perfection. Married to Emma, a stunning and charismatic philanthropist, their life in the bustling city of New York seemed picture-perfect from the outside. Emma was a woman who could light up any room, especially at high-profile charity events like the one they were hosting tonight at the Plaza Hotel. The event was a grand affair, with glittering chandeliers, elegantly dressed guests, and the hum of refined conversations filling the air. As David stood by the bar, sipping his bourbon, he couldn't help but admire his wife's poise and charm as she moved through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging smiles with New York's elite. Yet, amidst all the glamour, something felt off. Emma's usual warmth toward him seemed replaced by a strange aloofness, and David noticed her eyes darting nervously across the room, as if searching for someone. A pang of unease settled in his chest, but he brushed it off, telling himself that she was merely overwhelmed by the scale of the event. Little did he know, the perfect facade of his marriage was about to crack wide open in a way he could have never anticipated. As David lingered near the bar, his unease grew sharper, like a faint but persistent itch he couldn't ignore. The glittering charity event continued in full swing, with guests clinking champagne glasses and the soft hum of a live jazz band filling the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Suddenly the crowd seemed to part, and a woman entered the room with an air of quiet confidence that turned heads. Dressed in an understated yet elegant black gown, Clara Anderson walked in, her every step commanding attention. David's eyes were drawn to her almost magnetically, but what truly froze him in place was the familiar sparkle of a diamond ring on her left hand. His wedding ring. His heart skipped a beat, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the impossible. Clara's eyes met his, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Her gaze was calm yet piercing, a mix of pity and defiance that sent a chill down his spine. Summoning courage, Clara approached him, her voice low but deliberate. "We need to talk," she said, her words carrying a weight that made David's pulse quicken. She didn't need to say much. Her presence and the ring on her finger were clues enough that she held answers to questions he hadn't yet dared to ask. Her cryptic remarks about Emma and the ring only deepened his suspicions, pulling him into a web of betrayal he hadn't seen coming. In that moment, amidst the grandeur of the charity gala, David's world began to unravel, one veiled hint at a time. David's pulse quickened as Clara's cryptic words echoed in his mind. Determined to uncover the truth, he followed her through the lavish halls of the Plaza Hotel, leaving behind the bustling charity gala. They found a quiet corner in a side lounge, the muted light casting long shadows on the room's ornate decor. Clara's poised exterior began to crack as she sat down, her fingers nervously tracing the outline of his wedding ring. "Your wife and my husband," she began, her voice trembling with anger and pain. She explained how her husband, a successful real estate mogul named Richard Anderson, had given her the ring, a twisted trophy of his affair with Emma. "He said it was a souvenir," Clara spat bitterly, the words dripping with betrayal. As Clara's revelations unraveled, David felt his mind spiral. Fragmented memories began to surface. Emma's late-night phone calls she dismissed as work emergencies, the sudden weekends away for conferences, and the subtle but growing emotional distance between them. Each recollection now carried the weight of evidence, painting a picture he had been too blind or too trusting to see. Clara's story mirrored his own heartbreak. She spoke of her husband's lies, his frequent business trips, and the growing suspicion she had ignored until finding the damning proof: the ring. In their shared pain, David and Clara began piecing together the timeline of the affair. The gala, it seemed, was the nexus of their spouse's betrayal, a playground for their infidelity hidden in plain sight. Clara's heartbreak mirrored his own, and together they formed an unlikely alliance, determined to confront the truth head-on. In that quiet room, surrounded by the echoes of betrayal, David realized the perfection of his marriage had always been a facade, and the reality was far darker than he had imagined. The weight of Clara's revelations burned like fire in David's chest as they stepped back into the grandeur of the Plaza Hotel's main ballroom. The charity gala was still in full swing, the affluent guests blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Fueled by a mix of anger and heartbreak, David could no longer contain himself. Spotting Emma by the stage, her radiant smile and practiced charm now felt like a cruel mockery of their life together. He strode toward her, his voice cutting through the hum of the crowd as he called her name. Conversations faltered, and all eyes turned to them as David confronted Emma under the spotlight she had so carefully curated. "What's this, Emma?" he demanded, holding up Clara's hand with his wedding ring glinting under the chandelier. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Emma's polished facade faltered. At first, she laughed nervously, attempting to dismiss the accusation as absurd. But the weight of Clara's presence, combined with the undeniable evidence, left her no room to maneuver. As David's voice grew colder, recounting the details of her affair with Richard Anderson, Emma's composure crumbled. Her shoulders sagged, her eyes brimming with tears. Not of remorse, but of being caught. The tension reached its peak when Richard entered the room, drawn by the escalating whispers. His presence acted like gasoline on a fire. Emma instinctively stepped toward him, as if seeking refuge, but the act only deepened David's betrayal. Clara, unable to hold back her own anger, stepped forward to confront her husband. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with fury as she detailed the lies, the deceit, and the ring that had shattered both their lives. Richard tried to defuse the situation, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the mounting evidence left no room for doubt. The room grew heavy with an uncomfortable silence as the public confrontation reached its breaking point. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, whispers of scandal spreading like wildfire through New York's elite circles. Emma and Richard, exposed and humiliated, stood frozen as David and Clara finally walked away from the confrontation, their pain now shared but their dignity intact. It was a moment of raw emotion and irreversible change, the perfect veneer of the gala shattered to reveal the dark truth beneath. As the guests dispersed and the once vibrant ballroom of the Plaza Hotel fell silent, David found himself alone with Emma in one of the hotel's private lounges. The tension in the room was palpable, the air heavy with unspoken words. Emma, her makeup smudged and her earlier confidence reduced to fragility, sat across from him. "David, please," she began, her voice trembling. "I can explain." But her explanation, rooted in loneliness, unmet needs, and misguided choices, felt hollow against the enormity of her betrayal. Each word she uttered seemed to widen the chasm between them. The trust that once bound them now shattered beyond repair. Meanwhile, Clara had already made her decision. She had left the event with her head held high, her resolve unshaken. In the back of a yellow cab navigating Manhattan's glittering streets, she texted Richard a single message. "We're done." Her decision to leave was swift but firm, born out of the clarity that there was no salvaging a relationship built on lies. For David, however, the choice was far murkier. As Emma's pleas turned to tears, he wrestled with conflicting emotions. Should he attempt to rebuild what had been destroyed, Or was this the end of a chapter he had once thought would last forever? His thoughts spiraled as he replayed moments from their marriage, the shared laughter, the quiet nights, the growing silences that he had ignored. Had he been blind to the cracks all along? Or had Emma's betrayal simply exposed the truth? That their marriage had been a facade, a carefully curated image for the world to see. Sitting in the dimly lit lounge, David felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The fallout of the night had left him raw and broken, yet he also felt a strange sense of clarity. Whether he forgave Emma or walked away, one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. As dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline, David sat alone in his apartment, staring at the wedding ring he had slipped off his finger the night before. The night's events still felt surreal, like a nightmare he couldn't escape. Emma had returned to their shared home after their conversation at the Plaza Hotel, her tear-streaked face a stark contrast to the radiant host she had been just hours before. The silence between them was deafening, yet it spoke volumes. David now stood at a crossroads, faced with the weight of a decision that would define the rest of his life. In one version of this ending, David chooses to separate from Emma, the betrayal too deep to mend. In a symbolic act of closure, he leaves the wedding ring on the kitchen counter before walking out of the apartment, the cool morning air offering a bittersweet sense of freedom. This decision, while painful, becomes a testament to his self-respect and unwillingness to live a life built on broken vows. Alternatively, David might find himself willing to rebuild, though not without conditions. He tells Emma that their marriage can only survive if she seeks therapy and earns back his trust, a journey that will require time, patience, and a genuine commitment from both sides. This decision reflects his capacity for forgiveness, but also his understanding that true reconciliation comes with boundaries and mutual effort. In a third possibility, the story concludes ambiguously. David walks out of the Plaza Hotel into the quiet streets of New York, his mind clouded with unresolved emotions. The readers are left to interpret whether he will choose reconciliation, separation, or something in between, mirroring the complexities of real-life relationships. Meanwhile, Clara finds her own sense of closure. Having confronted her husband and made the decision to leave him, she begins a new chapter of her life with her head held high. Her courage and decisiveness serve as a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil David is still navigating. Whether the story ends in separation, rebuilding, or ambiguity, the underlying theme remains the same. Betrayal may shatter the foundations of trust, but it also forces individuals to confront uncomfortable truths and make choices that shape their future. For David and Clara, the events of the gala mark not just an ending, but also the possibility of new beginnings.